on Evolutionary now.
Hello, my friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family. Looks like we are live.
Yeah, if you guys could give us a thumbs up on the sound. How do we sound?
Oh, we got Craig in the house, and we might have confused people because we did post on Evolutionary that we're going live on EEARTS.
This is weird. I have all of this here, but you have nothing there.
Interesting, yeah. All Knowledge 2020 is with us. I see. Let's see. Are we on?
We're a little bit confused because we have okay, so can you guys hear us and see us okay?
Okay. So I think they were over at the other one.
Okay, somebody said great sound.
You're over there.
Okay. So
I've heard that shows it live on that one.
it is. So
Okay, so interesting stuff. Okay, sound is good. That's good because we switched what we were working on as well, because it's kind of like a hack that they get into one of the computers. So I knew that was going to happen, and so we switched over. So we could tell. You could tell when you're going to get kind of hacked.
So I do see some people are still over on the other side, though. Here, hold that. I'm going to text them and tell them to come on over.
Okay. So, okay, Basil is talking about Naughty Beaver. Yeah. Naughty disappeared. I don't think he's done anything in like 3 or 4 months, and we enjoyed him. He was definitely a lot of fun to listen to. I wonder if he is preparing for the space war. And, Israeli News Live, I saw he had put something up, and then it got taken down today as well. And, he has been talking about asteroids and things incoming as well. So lots of things going on.
Okay, and thank you for letting us know everything sounds good. Technology's been a little bit off lately, off and on. So, yeah, it'll be an interesting show today. We have some good information, some things to ponder, things to think about. Our lives are going to change. They're going to change quite a lot. And it's going to take a strong mind and a strong will, and the will to really survive, and not just survive, but move up and above our situations that we're going to find ourselves in, because we're all going to have unique, different situations.
And as we know, there's changes going on in many ways. Obviously, society looks like it's crumbling around us. And of course, we have all the nations tense. And, you could go biblical and talk about wars and rumors of wars. But when was there ever a time when we didn't have wars and rumors of wars? But what we do have going on is what appears to be massive earth changes going on, as well as, tension as far as civil unrest, not just in the United States, but in so many other countries as well, as people are waking up en masse. Unfortunately, they're also being, manipulated into fighting each other, just as we've talked about so many times.
Well, we need to understand, the Draco, I'm not exactly sure how to explain it, but they do use people as an avenue to try to destroy other people. When people find themselves being manipulating and deceitful and just not the best version of yourself that you can be, dishonest, sometimes the Draco are working through that and manipulating traumas to manipulate the situation.
So when you study like comparative mythology, it's really interesting that there's a theme that's constantly coming up. And we were talking recently about the Vedic tradition, the tradition of the Indus Valley, which is actually, it goes back pre-Aryan times. What really were they talking about with these wars of the quote-unquote gods, the Asuras and the Devas, for instance? with their vimanas, their flying ships, just blasting each other. And as we had said, there are places on this earth that show evidence of nuclear warfare in the distant past. It's not just that particular tradition, though. We could jump over to Norse mythology as well, and they talk about the wars of the gods as well. They have the Asir and the Vanir, and it's always fun to try to figure out who is who between like the different mythologies, the different traditions. It's all very interesting. So who are these quote-unquote gods? So that's where everything gets really, really entangled, because what we could see is that these are not the creator of the universe. They may be genetic scientists and warriors and all sorts of other beings, but they're not the one true creator. And when we look over at Greek and Roman mythology, we see the same sort of stories echoed again and again, everywhere we look. We had the Titans, or the elder gods, ruled the earth before the Olympians. Then one day the Olympians overthrew them. The ruler of the Titans was Kronos, his son was Zeus, and Zeus removed Kronos. So you had 12 Titan gods and goddesses. We have 12 tribes of Israel. We have the 12 apostles. We have 12 zodiac signs. It goes on. And then there are many that think it's all just simply astrotheology, and nothing other than just simply giving personalities to forces of nature. So there are people that believe that's all we're really looking at here. But it's so interesting, too, when we look at the Sumerian tales. They talk about the Igigi being basically gods, quote unquote, or lesser gods than the Anunnaki. And yet, at the same time, they rebelled, just like we see. So, when we're talking about the Igigi, in reference to the Anunnaki, is that the same story we're seeing over in Greece with the Titans and with, the Olympian gods? Is it the same story again? And then in the Sumerian story, because the Igigi rebelled and weren't going to work anymore, the minds, then they created man. Or did they really create man? Or did they conquer and downgrade humanity? Snip away some of the DNA. Make it, quote unquote, junk DNA. Because, they needed a race to be compliant and to be easily manipulated. And yet now we know we're going through changes because of ascension, because of all the energies that are coming in. So we are awakening. People's psychic abilities are increasing. And the people of the Indus Valley know about all this in great deal and detail and speak all about it. So when your Kundalini is activated and the pineal gland's wide awake, all the chakras are open and flowing, then there can be changes in our consciousness that could actually make us superhuman, or what we would take to be superhuman. So they talk about that as superpowers or cities. And it's interesting, too, because, we got modern myths with this, too, with like all your... if you go into all the Marvel comics and all these things, you have all sorts of different, they're almost like demigods when you think about it. When you start looking, each character is a little different, but that's kind of like our modern myth of this. So who really are these beings that are out there? And, there's a tendency to make one side purely good, one side purely evil. But what if there's competing factions that are really very, very gray, and maybe even gray heading on black when you get down to it? We see these sculptures that are always kind of the same. Now, this one is a god, an elongated head again. And we were talking about, do the Ijiji have elongated heads? Would we call them Homo capensis, perhaps? With all the skulls that we found, like in Paracas and other areas as well, and Caucasus and Carpathians. And do we get glimpses sometimes of shapeshifters that are maybe momentarily losing their ability to shapeshift? Think about the Irish tradition, the Celtic tradition, and Glamory. If you guys aren't familiar with it, it was the ability to make somebody think they're seeing something that they're not, and almost like throwing a spell. So are there beings that walk among us that are not really human? They're not Homo sapien, Homo sapiens sapiens. They're maybe something different, humanoid, but not one of us, so to speak. Interesting stuff when we see some of these photos. Now, this is supposed to be His Holiness Lord Nanur, second in line to Anunnaki royal lineage, and Grand Architect and Patron of the 33rd degree of Zion. So, is he not human? He looks kind of strange to me. Is he a delegate from another humanoid society? Perhaps, one that has altered our DNA?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he does look like he's losing his ability to kind of cloak himself. And I can't remember the exact phrase, but there is something in the Emerald Tablets that does discuss a time when the vibration will change and these beings will no longer be able to be cloaked or hidden or secret, and we will see them. And I think even right now it's becoming evident as far as who's the controllers, which people are making the rules that we're supposed to live by, and who are the people who are trying to free others. That's becoming more and more evident every day. And I sometimes feel like it feels deliberate, like a separating of the energies, very deliberate thing that seems to be happening right now with all of these chaotic things. I don't want to say too many vocabulary words about the chaos because we're, trying to get this information out, and it's been difficult, to say the least.
So I first read the Bible from cover to cover when I was 11. And actually, as a kid, as soon as I could read, I was in it. And that was way before I read anything of the Sumerian texts. And coming to around when I was around 20-ish is when I just came to a conclusion, especially like looking at the Old Testament, because when you look at the Old Testament, it's pretty harsh in a lot of spots. It's a lot of judgment. It's a lot of punishment. It's exactly like what we've seen when people have slaves. And, when you then read the Sumerian texts and the Sumerian stories, and, you get the story that humanity has become a slave race. Wow. Then I go back and look at the Old Testament, and it makes a lot of sense. It really, really does. Because there's a lot, it's all full of fear. It is so much full of fear. Like, you better obey. You better obey or you're going to be punished. And it even talks about like stopping the rain, creating fires, sending pestilence, if we disobey, quote unquote, the Lord. So, it's really easy to go back and then, look at it after you've read the Sumerian stories and see where it looks like another continuation of the Sumerian stories. Exactly. When we get into like the book of Joel, chapter 2, it's pretty creepy, scary stuff, and some have even said there's two different gods in there. And then of course there's what we now know that, it's not that God's having, psychotic episodes, and going from being beautiful and loving and benevolent to, just nothing but punishment and everything. And, of course we could look at things like the law of karma, law of cause and effect. But when you then look at the New Testament and the teachings of Christ, instead of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, it's turn the other cheek. And it's almost like it's very, very different teachings going on there. And of course, there's whole theologies built around, basically supporting that idea, that it's a new covenant. It's a new agreement with God. Yet when we look at the Old Testament, it's brutal. It really is brutal in so many places. But yet, there's things in there that are intermingled that are feeling like they're giving us some truths and some clues. But it's very, very ominous. The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and terrible day of the Lord to come. That's not a loving God. I mean, where's the love in that? Because ultimately, if God is love, well, the opposite of love is fear. So fear doesn't lead to love. So it's really interesting. But if you keep your slaves in a state of fear, then they will be usually relatively productive and they'll do as you say.
Yeah, that's what they need us to do to help with their agenda. They need us to be in a state of fear, because when human beings are in a state of fear, they start looking for a way out. They start looking for relief. And as long as they're there with their own solution, they can continue to kind of lead the herd, or, just keep everybody together. And that's just the standard way that they operate. So anytime you look at a belief system, you look at the fear in it, what are they making you fearful of? And dissect that, is it really true? And I just believe, and I really don't want to upset anyone, but I do believe that there's so much in the Bible that has been created just to keep us under control. And they use it under the guise of a divine being, which is really repulsive. But that's, that kind of gives you an idea of what kind of people we're dealing with now.
And as Warren says, what he finds interesting about the Book of Enki is in his description of the battle on Mars, and there are signs that match that text. Yeah, there's all sorts of evidence all over the place. I was going to include some interesting things from Al Bielek, but then I thought I'm just going to do a separate video on it so we could delve into it for a while. He was a gentleman that claimed that he was part of the Philadelphia experiment. And what's fascinating is he came out, in 1988, he watched a movie about the Philadelphia experiment, and it triggered memories in him. And he actually realized that his name wasn't Al Bielek, he was somebody else. Actually, somebody that had taken part in that experiment and time traveled. And so he said he traveled to, I think it was 2137, and the population on the Earth in 2137, he said, was around 300 million. So that was really kind of interesting, because he started to come out and talk about all this stuff in the 1990s, like 1990, 1991. So it was, the Georgia Guidestones were put up in 1980. So he might have been aware of those, and maybe he was trying to manipulate that to fit this timeline and all. But also, when we look at the Deagle numbers for 2025, and massive losses in the population of many countries, pretty much all NATO countries, he did say, this Al Bielek guy said that he was told that there was a massive world war and that things came to a head in 2025. And at that time, there was a huge population loss. And also, not just that, but also earth changes as well did a ton of damage. So it was just interesting to see that another source pointing out that 2025 time frame. And, there's so much going on right here. There's so much going on that doesn't meet the eye. So we started a day off by going into meditation, as we normally do, and Cindy got some info of what is coming and what's part of this whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that timelines that I pick up on, and it can be a little confusing and convoluted, and sometimes disturbing. But you really have to go back and be the best version of yourself. Brighten your own light. The brighter we can make that light, the safer we're going to be. And how do we do that? These are through practices of meditation, through mantras, through, self-realization. I would say like the meditation is super, super important to help brighten your light. They did these studies. I think they were monks, and they put them somewhere in like the worst place, somewhere around New York, in like one of the highest crime ridden areas. And they meditated there, and they realized that shockingly, the crime rate like just dropped like a rock. That was really incredible. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things coming. I picked up some information on that Muamua, and it really bothered me because it's almost like, yeah, they were a main scout, and there will be more to come. And what, it's like we're cattle to them, but if you are cattle, you at least, at the very least, if you're at somebody's mercy, you want an owner who's going to be kind to you. And these other beings that I picked up on that are coming in after we saw the Muamua, they're not going to be kind. They're going to be like Vikings. And the one thing that can keep us safe through this is our own light, our very own light. The beings that are controlling now, at least we have some choices where we can step outside of the system somewhat. The ones that I picked up on that were coming in, there's no mercy there, and it just really disturbed me.
So what she got was basically that it was a scouting ship, and it was basically sampling what is available as far as natural resources on the planet, and also particularly people.
And humans are kind of in the way, basically.
That humans are in the way. So this is part of what's coming. So when we see Space Force and, all these satellites going up into space, there's more than one thing, more than one agenda going on here. And so, recognize that if the ones that are controlling our planet right now are the quote-unquote EGG, they have their own agenda going. And of course, they're not benevolent really to humans. They're just looking at us, again, as an asset, a resource, something to be used and utilized. And they also know that with the time that we are in, with the energies coming in, we're waking up, they're going to have a hard time controlling us in the future, as we do outnumber them greatly. But you also have the great and terrible day of the Lord, quote unquote, coming. And there's another, I forget, it wasn't Joel. I forget which Old Testament book it was now, but it just says that they will see the sign up in the skies and the whole earth will wail, because there's going to be a lot of ships up there. It's going to be scary. I've had visions of this since I was 19, where I actually saw ships in the sky and then in the sea too. It was like I could look down into the ocean and see that there were ships coming from underneath the ocean out, and there were ships coming down from the sky as well. So this Oumuamua, it did something that was natural wouldn't do. It just utilized the gravitational force of the sun to slingshot itself back out on a different trajectory. That's exactly what scientists have said we would do when we get to intergalactic travel. So that's what this was. It was definitely an intergalactic vehicle. And it came in and slingshotted after basically assessing things. And they could also be assessing the defenses of the quote-unquote Space Force, as well.
Miss Judy K., bless your heart. We love you so, so much. It means more than you know. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy K. Stay safe over there in Southwest Florida. These are going to be really, really challenging times. Now, the thing to take from this is again, we are all spiritual beings, multidimensional beings having a human experience. And so it's really all about how we react in these times. We don't want to get dragged into anything that's going to pull us down vibrationally, because the true way to escape these, horrors and everything is through raising your vibrations at the same time. So doing the inner work, doing the spiritual work, building your Merkaba, because then we will have the ability to go above and beyond. Now, it's going to be really trying, obviously, with everything that's going on, all the chaos that's underway and coming.
Yeah, that's very deliberate, with all the chaos and everything happening. That's to keep us from rising up, because if we rise up and we're actually safer. Now, I don't understand, I can't articulate why. It's just information that I get. If the brighter our light, the safer we are.
Yeah, and don't give your power away, because they trick us constantly into giving our power away. It's almost like if they put it right out there, what they're going to do, and if we kind of, don't really oppose it and don't say, I do not consent to this, then because of some sort of galactic law, they're able to get away with doing things without getting the cosmic police, so to speak, coming down on them. So the galactics are watching closely. They are definitely watching closely. And what we have is a negative group that's controlling us on this planet right now. And there's actually another negative group incoming. And then after that one, those that can make it through, keep your vibrations high, then you'll see the benevolent ones after all that, because they will return. And it's just that it's free will. It's all about free will.
It's all about free will. I don't know if this is the right analogy, but say we give away all of our information, say with these smartphones now, all these new smartphones. Well, you can't really have a smartphone unless you sign up for an account. And on this account, you have to give your name, your address, all of this information. So willingly, you're giving away your own information for a convenience. And they do this all over the place.
Yeah, I'll give you another analogy. How many times have you downloaded an app and then it says, do you agree to the terms and conditions? And you're like, I'm not going to read all that crap. And you just say yes. Well, it's just kind of like that. Yeah. That's kind of like what they have us doing. They have us just kind of nodding consensually to things that we shouldn't be. And we have to make sure that we're not giving our power away, because they are doing that. They control us. They control us through our politics and our religions as well. Not to say that there is an underlying core through all the religions. And, if we really look to it, it's just all about love and compassion. And where are you vibrating at? Again, it comes down to, everything is energy, and consciousness creates vehicles for consciousness. So your body is just a vehicle for consciousness in this density. The other thing, too, is that we have a lot of inherent power in us that we don't even understand. When we're talking about the fall of man, it's a fall in density, and so, we've been in the Kali Yuga. We've been in a very dense, lower, dark vibrational age. And that is ending. So we are starting to move up to where we can actually be where the benevolent ones are.
Yes, we are. And they don't want that, because once we reach a certain point, they can no longer control us. We're out of their control. And I'm not sure exactly what that looks like, but what I do know is it has everything to do with raising your own vibration, brightening your own light, and making it so that things that go on around you, we're not stuck in the ups and downs of the emotion. And right now, they're really jerking our emotions around like crazy, and say you're already a sensitive person, well, this is not the place for sensitive people. This is not designed to help keep us stable. But I think just knowing that what their game is and their agenda is might help some people stabilize their minds and their hearts, and thus raising your vibration.
So they are definitely trying to pull us down, to keep us down in line with where they are. So we have a negative faction that's been controlling the planet. Now, if we want to go to the Book of Enoch, then you talk about the Watchers and, the, again, fallen ones. See, this is where things get a little bit tricky, because there's angels and then there's angels, There's angels in the definition of a messenger, and then there's angels that are really of the Davidic kingdom that are very, very high up. But that's not what we have with these beings. These are just, beings that have more technology and have been around doing things of this sort for a very, very long time. Just as we see, look at our culture, and like when Cindy started talking, she was saying these are like Vikings, like pirates. They're all about looting and bounty. And if you could even go and look at Independence Day. Yeah, you remember the movie Independence Day? And Independence Day 2 I thought was really good, because that was kind of cool with the dark side of the moon and the secret space thing and all that. But anyway, they're a plague, and they are parasitic, and they just go and use whatever natural resources. Look at the corporations. Look at the way this system treats the earth. It's just to be used, abused, and move on. Obviously, they're not from here. They're like a cancer, and so obviously they're not indigenous to this planet. If they were, they would be suicidal. It doesn't make any sense when we look at it that way. So what you have is negative entities that have been in control of us, that have been giving us a false history, that have been doing things to keep us in the dark. And there's also negative ones coming. Like Cindy had also gotten the message, don't go with the first ones.
Right, don't go with the first line of ships. Don't do it. That's what I got.
Yeah, and others have talked about this too. And we've mentioned like Phil Schneider, who's no longer with us. So many others have mentioned this as well. There's an intergalactic slave trade that goes on. And there's millions of people that go missing all the time. And when we look at, say, the Betty Andreasson story, when she was taken up, she, saw all different types of beings in basically these cylinders that were filled with some sort of liquid. And they were in a state of stasis. They were being taken from one place to another. They were basically being used to have genetic experiments done on. And, even worse things than that. I mean, even worse. As we know, we look at the Native American legends of the reptilians, and it's known that they eat people, so there's, that makes me think of, what was that, Outer Limits, or was it the Twilight Zone, to serve man.
Oh, yeah.
We came here to serve man. Yeah. Fatten them up, baste them a few hours, and there you go.
And they have fattened us up, for sure.
So it's a sobering scenario what we are really facing, because we're facing several different things going on at once. And so there is some reality to the secret space program. And as we had talked before, there's different factions here on Earth that have different opinions on what to do with humankind. Just like when we look back, Enki didn't want everybody killed. Enlil just wanted to be done with it. He just didn't want to bother with humans anymore. Let's just get rid of them. We'll figure something else out. We'll do something different. Now, Enki had more feelings for us, but Enki, when Anu came, Anu was going to make us like them. And Enki tricked us, basically. and made it so that we stayed a slave race, quote unquote, instead of, drinking from the fountain of youth and living forever like the gods, quote unquote. Interesting. So, it's not so black and white. There's many, many shades of gray, even though some of these shades of gray are pretty damn black when you get down to it. So, interesting stuff we have going on. We were talking, too, about the fact that if you look at it from the MIC standpoint versus the banking cabal, the banking cabal, as we had said, they want to move all the power to China, where perhaps the MIC wants to keep things a little more status quo. And the MIC would actually, again, they are ultimately Draco controlled. So they would use us just to be more infantry to just throw out there against the foe. How many times do the kings and queens just, stand back and let, the pawns just be slaughtered? Same sort of thing that goes on in the galactic scale as well. So we have to be aware of that. And so, there are those that would utilize us, as Zeke's having a dream there. There are those that would utilize us as just another asset, even in this bigger game of war that's going on. So we are going to see some amazing sights. And again, if you go to the Bible, it says that people's hearts will fail them for what they see.
Yeah. So, there are some things that I feel are put in the Bible because they've done this before and they're going to do it again. They know what's going to happen. So that's why they can write the future, because they keep doing it. And it's just really important that we hold on to ourselves and prepare as best we can, because things are going to change. Things are truly going to change. And there's so many people asleep. And I know a lot of you are in a situation where your family members are just snoozing away and going along with like mainstream and, watching the news and still buying all these products that are packed full of poisons and, even like lotions and makeup and things like that, that you have to absorb that into your liver. It's so toxic. I don't know where I was going with that. Okay, so asleep people, that's right. And we're waking up to the fact that, that's not good for us. That's not going to help us with longevity. And then I do keep hearing about these things called med beds, which I do want to learn more about, because you can actually lay in them and this bed can sense where you need help most and somehow magically get that information and help you get better. So I'm hearing that they're going to be coming out with them and some pretty awesome other technologies too to help mankind, which would be wonderful in this day and age.
So Goons R Us saw some interesting lights moving high in the sky over northwest Georgia last night. Yeah, there's going to be an awful lot of sightings. So there's all sorts of beings here. There are the other ones here too that are very, very neutral, just doing their thing or just watching the show because they know what's coming. So when you look at things from a prophetic standpoint too, if you are an entity that has a lifespan like they talk about in the Sumerian Kings list, tens of thousands of years, and that there is some sort of either a treaty that's going to be done with at a certain point in time, and you obviously have quantum computing, so you can know what everything is going on, really, everything that's going to be going on at this particular point in time. Or even if that these raiders, just like in the old days, there were certain times when the Vikings would go raiding, and there's other times when you were relatively safe and in the clear. And, we could also, look at pirates and other beings that prey off of other beings. So it really wouldn't be that big a deal to know around the time in the season, especially when perhaps when this galactic wave is coming. So when humanity is going to be waking up. And then you're going to have to come and see what you could salvage of the herd, and maybe even take some of the herd and bring them somewhere else, where maybe you could outrun the galactic wave. Who knows? It's interesting conjecture to think about. But we are definitely not alone.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really know exactly what's going to happen. It's just this information I pick up on pieces and parts. And I think the reason I don't get like details is because the good galactics, they don't want to interfere with our free will. This is our time to shine. We came down here for a job and to help mankind and wake up humanity, and they don't want to interfere with that. And I think that's actually a wonderful gift, to give somebody's where they can understand their true potential.
Yeah, if we understood it from the other side of the veil, like from our higher self perspective, it would be just like there'd be no point in playing a game.
Right.
At all, if you had every cheat code.
Oh yeah.
You know how you get the cheat codes and you put the cheat codes in, that kind of takes away from the game.
Yeah, and they say it's a test here, but how could it be a test if you always have all the answers?
Yeah, exactly. So very interesting. So Oumuamua apparently was some sort of scouting ship from this information. Coming by, probably taking note of the population, taking note of the defenses that have been put up around the planet. As we know, there's so many satellites that have been getting shot up into space since around 2017. Seems like the escalation was since around then, and then of course we had the Great Sign, and we had the eclipse. The second eclipse is coming in 2024. What's the world going to look like in 2025? And as we were saying, that was interesting that gentleman that says he was part of the Philadelphia experiment and time traveled up to 2137 says that the population is only 300 million around the entire globe. And he said there was less than 50 million people in the United States. He also said that the Earth changes had changed things, not as much as what you see on the Navy map or Gordon Michael Scallion's map, but that, a lot of California was gone. A lot of the coastlines were completely changed. Most of the UK was gone. Just a little bit of Ireland and Scotland were left. And I'm sure somebody will say, Ireland's not part of the UK. But yeah, we know. There's always people that want to be technical. Yeah. Just like when you start saying things like, mispronouncing states or mispronouncing cities.
Yeah, people like to split hairs.
I know they do. Some of them are like, take the time to learn how to pronounce every place perfectly. Yeah. Well, it's like, we just want to get the information out. Right. I think that's more important, than like if there's trains coming down the track and you're on the track, and I mispronounce something, and meanwhile you get hit by the train. Yeah.
You're gonna stand there and complain how you mispronounce.
It's comical, really. So very interesting what's going on. And that Oumuamua, the name means scout. Isn't that curious? So did they know that when they named it? Because again, if we go into so many whistleblowers that say, of course, the government's been working with extraterrestrials for a long time. So then they've known what it is. And you actually had scientists that came straight out and said, hey, that's not natural. First off, the shape. And second off, the way it used the gravitational force of the sun to slingshot itself back out. And then, of course, you get everybody trying to cover things up. It happens all the time. So interesting. It was a scout, and when are they going to be here is the question. And what Cindy's gotten is that it won't be really too long.
Might be relatively soon. I can't really give a time. It's more of a feeling, and the feeling feels relatively soon, like maybe when there's a peak in the chaos within the coming months.
Yeah, and we know when that's going to peak.
Yeah.
You have that quote-unquote asteroid, the election day asteroid coming, on November 2nd.
Is it an asteroid?
Is it really an asteroid? That's part of it again. And thank you, Hilde. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for your support. We couldn't do it without you guys. and I'm really curious why Steve Bannoon over at Israeli News Live posted something, and then it said the owner took it down. But I mean, they took down one of my videos on Evolutionary, and it said the same thing, but I didn't take it down.
Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that they do. And then if you reference anything against one of the bigger, I don't even want to call them what they are, the bigger people, if you say something against what they have put out, then they can take the videos down too. So your guys' help is really, really appreciated. It's so important, so we can keep pulling the information and getting it out to you, because we're not interested in taking a side, and we haven't been interested in taking a side. The side that we're taking is the truth, the side of the truth, and get that out there so you can make decisions for yourself based on your unique situation.
So many people believe that Project Bluebeam is going to make a fake alien invasion to just basically bring in the New World Order. And, there's so much back and forth between information and misinformation. And, you think about it, it gets your head spinning. What's really going to happen? What's really going to happen? And so when we see the return of the gods, when we look at the ancient scriptures, they all say that these beings were physical. At least they could take a physical body and interact with us. And we do know also that there's a lot of different dimensions and densities. And consciousness exists all over, and all these different densities. So, it's a bit of a. It's not like we are talking either or. There are both scenarios that are going on. Like, you could see it with some of these people. Really, you could see it when they're overshadowed. And we talked about Hitler and how one of his closest aides made a note just saying that the Fuhrer would look like such a tiny man and just, not exude power or anything like that. And then he would go up on the stage, and it was like he was transformed. And all of a sudden, he was this powerful orator and seemed so much more powerful and bigger than he really, really was. And so there are these dark beings that really can overshadow. Just literally, it's like a possession. Overshadow and dwell within, and manipulate humans to horrible ends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's just the way things are, and I think it's important that we understand what's happening, because we are all different. We all have different needs and wants and desires, but like, the most important thing to keep yourself safe, what you need to do really, truly, and the Galactics will not stop pushing me on this one, is to raise your vibration, brighten your light. These are the things that keep you safe.
Very interesting. High Priestess Angelique says that the day before Sally hit, Hurricane Sally, she dreamed of 2 dragons. Very interesting fighting. So, because that's what we really, are basically kind of talking about. Because when I asked Cindy, I said, what did these beings in Oumuamua look like? Because she's quite a remote viewer. And you said?
Well, they're like between reptilian and human. It was confusing because I knew that they weren't human, but the reptilian kept coming up. So, and then someone else mentioned in there, hey, were these beings like 15 foot tall? And even though they were sitting down, you're right, I do think they were extremely tall, because it's the vibration, the feeling that I got, that they were very large.
Yeah, very, very big. Yeah. And so, basically 2 dragon factions, because, we have the controllers here, the ones that are really controlling the controllers that we have physically on the planet are, the Draco. And one of the things that they use, what they do with this intergalactic slave trade is, they make grays. And they use like our genetic material to make the grays. And they make all sorts of different hybrids to basically, worker bees. That's what it is, and as we said before, just look at the system that's upon the planet, and we realize now that we're still living in a feudal system because, as we said, like in Australia and Canada, the vast amount of the land is all owned by the crown still. And when you get down to it with eminent domain, any one of us that has property in the United States, it could be taken from us as well. Yeah. So the reality is we're still in a feudal society ruled by lords and ladies. And so Adonai, well, that means Lord, and again, it's, we'll take a knee. It really, the stories all go together. We can see this. But not all these ETs were always the way that the ones are now that are here, or perhaps this other party that's coming back to kickstart a war in the sky above us. Because there are many stories of the benevolent and shining ones that were here that also were the mighty men of old, men of renown. That's not negative. That's not a fallen, quote unquote, angel. And I really think we got to get out of the more generic type of term of angel and demon, because that doesn't really describe it well enough. Again, it's like we could take a term like that, and again, you could go break things down into, okay, well, there's a lot of life on Earth, right? Well, let's start categorizing it. Okay, well, we could say that flies, that swims, and that walks on the land. I mean, we could break it down to the stuff that's walking on the land and then say, okay, well, we have mammals, we have lizards, we have some insects, and then we could break it down. Okay, well, let's just look at the mammals then. Okay, well, what type of mammals? Well, we have dogs, we have cats, we have humans, we have chimps. So when you're just talking angels and demons, it's way too generic. That's just categorizing so broadly. You're not really getting the bigger picture, because there's in these categories, there's all sorts of beings. It's loaded. And as we talked about, the texts, the Vedic texts and the texts that come from the Indus Valley people say there's 432,000 humanoid species in our galaxy alone. That's a lot.
Mm-hmm. There is. And, Rizar was asking, can I turn chaos into a positive force? And absolutely, you sure can. And that's another misconception I feel that a lot of people have, is how I'm just one person, I can't change anything. But I believe with our collective energy, we can change things in the ether. We can change things energetically. And you don't need to do it with a group of people at the same time either. If we all put an effort to shed light on the darkness that's, going to come here and harm us, I do believe we can change the situation, raising the vibration, which that'll change a lot of things more than I think many of us can comprehend. It can change timelines.
Yeah, there are multiple timelines going on. So one of the other important aspects of what we got was the Earth's ascension.
Oh, yeah.
So, let's not forget to talk about that.
Okay, so they were telling me that people of the light that are light anchors, wherever you're at, it is very important you anchor that light there. Now, again, I don't understand the full details of it, but we are spread around the earth exactly where we need to be, so that when she does ascend, it's like these anchors of light, all of us where we're at exactly are going to help pull her up. So, if you're at where you're at and you're called to be there, I feel that there's a very important purpose, so that you can help her ascend. And, and it needs to be like spread out evenly. We're all over the place.
And the other thing too is that it feels like there will be a split at some point in time. So with EEARTS, the reason why I chose the photo I did for it is because it resonates with me And if you like look over here, you see that there's the Earth splitting in two. And at some point, it's like there's going to be a 5D Earth, and then there might be a shell of something still on the 3D plane. So we want to be on that 5D Earth. That's where we want to be. We want to go upward, because that is going to be what takes us, well, it gives us our wings back. Because we don't understand, who we really are. There's a reason why, if we are strong, we can affect tremendous change. So, people have said too, why do you kind of seem like you're trashing the Bible at times, but then quoting it? It's because, when you look at all the scriptures, they are so intertangled, and there's many different translations, mistranslations, and then it's been purposefully, there's been a lot of undermining. And so, there are truths that's in there. There's truths that are in all different systems. I've read so many different holy books from, going back to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Tao Te Ching, and, so many different Vedic scriptures, the Puranas, there's the Upanishads. The Upanishads are wonderful teachings as well. There's so many wonderful traditions, many books that come out of Buddhist philosophy, and there's so much good in all those to be gleaned. It's a matter of not taking a dogmatic viewpoint of it and finding the universal truths. So that's what we need to do, and then just lift upwards. As I've shared with you guys, one of my favorite things that I loved to do on a regular basis when I was in an area that had them was go to a kirtan, which kirtan is like, it just means basically to recite back, where one person will say something, and then the whole crowd will say it. Everybody else will say it. And it's usually done to music, and it's usually traditional Vedic mantras, but also other things too. We did things from not just the Hindu tradition, Christian tradition, Jewish tradition, Islam, Native American, all these different traditions, because you'll find saints in all traditions. It's really about the individual. It's not about the dogma. It's about the individual and what you hold in your heart. And so when we could start to unify, instead of thinking that there's only going to be one perfect dogma and everything else is coming from demons, it's not the case. There was definitely a lot of demonic energy around, that's for sure, and it's the energy that's trying to keep us separate.
It does. And there's people I think sometimes don't even understand that they're being manipulated, and that's really sad, because you're completely blind to it until you can acknowledge it. And I think a lot of people are simply asleep until they're awake. And then even after you're awake, you need to be on guard. You need to be on guard that you're not being used by a force. Because if you're open enough to be, if you're open to spirit, then I think you really need to be careful about which spirits are coming in. And sometimes that's really difficult to discern.